Welcome to episode 3 of the Grassroots To Greatness coaching podcast. Today we are with Harrison Grant. He specialises in sports science, has his qualification and loads of experience working with players and helping them with their physical development. Harrison today is going to talk about how we can help players develop and what different stages they're at and what they need at all of those stages. He's going to go through warm-ups, when we can use warm-ups, fitness work and how we can develop players in their fitness work and what they actually need. And we're going to talk about how he develops strength, and Harrison will really give some good information as well about the female game and how he needs to adjust what he delivers to players who are playing in the female rather than the male game. This is a really interesting conversation for grassroots coaches to learn from an expert about physical development in children and adults, with loads of practical tips that you can use in your coaching sessions.
We'll start with, can you just tell us about your background and your coaching journey?
Okay, so it started off pretty much as I was leaving sixth form and going into university, doing kind of youth football alongside playing. Did my degree, did my master's degree as well, straight after. And throughout that time of doing my degree in strength and conditioning, I was coaching predominantly at youth level whilst playing, and then as I left university, it just so happened that I became a FA skills coach as well, back when that skills program was running. So that was my coaching full-time as my only job, and I only kind of really dabbled into S&C stuff as I was going through kind of that period of my life. And then as I started touching onto more elite academy, centre of excellence football, it was only really when I went into the National League, or it is full-time, but let's say semi-professional football, that kind of both strength and conditioning and coaching kind of mirrored together and became a bit more holistic with everything. And then I just took over a health and fitness company while still doing full-time football, essentially. And kind of that was the pinnacle or the pyramid of both combining both my coaching experience and my, let's say, the physical corner, strength and conditioning corner, whatever you want to call it, together, whilst I was a tutor. So how long have we been tutors for? Quite a while, isn't it?
6-7 years.
A while now.
Yeah.
So do that alongside as well, coach the B licence and C licence. So, and then I'm here with you today.
Brilliant. You've had quite a varied journey there, working with youngsters, grassroots football, up to National League level. What would you say your biggest challenges have been during those roles?
I think personally, my biggest challenge was my first role at full-time football or professional football in the National League. That was with Maidstone when they were in the National League, and it was the challenge of still trying to implement, because I was a S&C coach for there, it was still trying to implement what I would have normally wanted to do, whilst actually looking at the bigger picture of, you've got a team that needs to win games and you're just part of the cog to try and get them to win games, as it is so cutthroat. There's no room for, let's try this out, let's try that out. We need to basically work together to try and win. And that was always the hardest bit to what I wanted to do, to actually what was the bigger picture of how can I just influence rather than how can I change. And that was a big challenge. But I think everyone at any point, even at grassroots level, if you want to work in the physical corner and try and develop, let's say, an under 10 speed or an under 8's ability to change direction quickly and things like that, you're always going to have hurdles and barriers to overcome, because everyone grows at different rates, and especially at that age, and everyone's from different backgrounds, and you've only got a certain amount of time with them, and there's challenges at every age group, I think, in every area of level of ability.
Okay, brilliant. Did you ever have, you don't have to mention any names, any conflicts or disagreements where you were saying, we need to do this, and a manager said, no, we're doing this?
Yeah, all the time. Yeah, absolutely. And that, at every level as well, at every level. Because whether it's experience or whether it's different to what they're used to, or it's completely different again, it goes against the grain, or it's what would be the priority for the players. At every level I've had resistance, but then that's all part of it, because they want to do it one way, you want to try and change things, you want to do it your way, they want to do something different. So it's every level. And the hardest level is actually at Grassroots.
Right, why is that? Explain.
Multiple opinions.
Right, from parents as well?
Everyone, coaches, parents, clubs, everything.
Yeah.
So you're seen as adding value until it gets to the point of where that value then has to supersede something else.
Right.
Or someone doesn't agree with, or they don't see instant results, or it's completely different to what they're used to. That's where the biggest...
Is there any frustration in that? Because if I think back to when we've done coaching courses and tutoring, and we've done any kind of Q&A, you get asked loads of questions about stuff like this by the candidates, and they will, once you give them the information that you've got and you show your knowledge, pretty much, to be fair, all of them are like, wow, like now I've spoken to someone that's got knowledge of this and specialises in this, they'd learn a lot more and take a lot from it. Is it when people are probably not as educated on it, and then they're saying, well, it should be done like this, just based on their kind of their beliefs or their theory of what they've always done?
I think that's definitely part of it. Definitely to prior experience, or if they were a player, or if they've watched, or they've got friends in places that do this and they think it should be done a certain way. And we know as well, like, football's all opinionated anyway in the whole scheme of things. But that's a bigger part of it. And it depends on what your priority is. So if your priority is, I want to make, if we are taking strength and conditioning as a big part of it, if we are taking that as a priority, then that needs to be a priority in your sessions, in your training, in whatever you kind of plan and deliver. But if it's not, that's absolutely fine. You just prioritise something else. It's when people want everything at the same time and then realise that they can't have that.
Yeah, fair enough. I think that's the thing, when you go through your coaching badges though, when you go up to B licence and A licence especially, a lot of the focus there is about how do you try to integrate a lot of it. How do you get the fitness work and the S&C work in amongst your tactical work, technical work, etc. But I found that bit with the A licence one of the most challenging bits, but probably one of the most enjoyable bits for me personally, trying to figure that bit out. I don't know what your experience was like with that.
I think the A licence, when they did the A licence, that was the only time in all the coaching badges that they factored that in.
Yeah.
To actually, how do you work with a strength coach or fitness coach? How do you factor that within your sessions, and how do you create and collaborate a session whilst it'll be on your A licence when they brought the national teams together?
Yeah.
And it's like, right, then you've got the opposition coach that's going, we need to set our team up like this, and then you've got the fitness coach going, we need to do this amount of work.
Yeah.
And then you've got the technical and tactical coach going, we need to work on this with our team. And you've got a combination of different contributions to the session to create the session, and it's like, actually then there's one person that's going to deliver that session with a combination of different people that's adding to it.
Would you say that, obviously there's a lot to get through on these courses, would you say that grassroots coaches would benefit from it being involved earlier than that, or do you think there's other areas that are probably more important to focus on?
It's priorities again. I think there's a value in it, but I also think because it's such a in-depth knowledge or in-depth subject, let's say, that regardless, you'd only scratch the surface. But I do think, as you mentioned earlier, a little bit of information probably goes quite a long way, or a little bit of education based around what's right, what's probably not the best things to do, what's good practice, that probably goes quite a long way. So I see there's value in it, but would I say that it's the most important thing that they need to add to the courses? That's up for debate.
Yeah. Okay, brilliant. Just going back a little bit then, back to you've just finished school and you've gone to study your degree. What inspired you to focus on strength and conditioning in your journey, rather than being the main technical or tactical coach?
I've always loved the gym. Yeah. Always kind of enjoyed being physically active. done loads of different events, used to compete in powerlifting and all of that as well as football. So it was kind of more of an interest than a hobby and a passion rather than anything. And it was only because when I was at sixth form doing, was it A-levels back then?
Yeah, back in the day, yeah.
A-levels or ASA or whatever it is. I was doing PE and someone came in to say, yeah, you can do, have you looked at doing like, rather than just sports science, because that was typically what people did at university in terms of that area, have you looked at strength and conditioning? And I hadn't, because I didn't know anything about it, read about it. So had that person not told me about it, I probably wouldn't have done it at university. But so it's more of a passion rather than anything else, and it just so happened that I could earn a career out of it and then combine both football, which I've always done, with strength and conditioning.
I think that might be actually why I think about most coaches. That's why they get into coaching, because football's their passion, and that's what they want to do. And I think it's good now that there's more pathways. Like I still get. Actually, I'm quite openly saying this. My dad still asks me when I'm going to get a proper job, because he doesn't never saw coaching as a career. Whereas actually now there's more awareness, there's more jobs, there's more roles. A lot young people now do see progression and pathways there. I would question that they all understand the commitment it will take to get right to the top of that pathway. But there are still careers that you can make out of coaching, whether that's in schools, in academies, etc., etc. So having that strength and conditioning part of it as well, people knowing that's a route and a pathway, is important. Okay, let's get stuck into the nitty-gritty part. And I'm aware this. Why I was interested in doing this podcast and interviewing yourself is because I think there might be a lot of stuff that you'll say, one, people might disagree with, or people have no knowledge or understanding of. Especially when it comes back to a lot of people do things because that's what they done when they were younger, like a couple of laps around the pitch, stand and do static stretching, etc., etc. So let's jump in with then. At what age do grassroots football players and kids need to work on fitness as people see it?
It's going in depth. It depends on what you mean by fitness, in theory. But if you were to take the holistic view of fitness, incorporating all the ABCs and everything as early as possible.
Can you just say what just for those that don't know what ABC is?
So ABC is agility, balance, coordination. They're kind of your fundamental grounding or the foundations of what a child will be able to do in terms of their physical capacity. So being able to run, balance, be coordinated with their body, things like that. That's kind of the ABCs. You normally add speed in there anyway, the ABCs, plural, but they're kind of the fundamentals. So I'd say the more you're working on them as much as possible, or the earlier you're working on them as much as possible, the better. It only changes when you start going, fitness is actually how far can we run, or how much energy have we got, things like that, and then that's where it starts to change a little bit.
So let's go into that, because I think a lot of grassroots coaches will see fitness as that. So the comments I kind of see online sometimes are, oh, other teams are fitter than us, we get tired near the end of games, and this is foundation phase. And then there's also the question about strength, as in your interpretation of strength training is probably different to someone who's not knowledgeable in this expertise. Like if you're not knowledgeable in this area, strength training is, like, what age should I get kids on weights? That's what some people think. So that's kind of a two-part question. Okay. When should they be working on trying to increase their kind of stamina and that ability? And then when should they start be working about strength training in terms of, right, get them on the weights type thing?
In terms of stamina and endurance, things like that, anything before puberty is going to be like non-existent. You're not going to get anything out of it. Purely for the fact of their cardiovascular system hasn't fully developed yet. So what we would say is, if we were going to do a 5k run and we try and get better, it would actually improve our ability on the football pitch. But if a 10-year-old or a 9-year-old or whatever is doing long distance running, yeah, it's great activity. Don't get me wrong, it's great for that. But if it's a whole thing of let's do pre-season, we want to get ourselves working and going for longer, it's not going to make a difference. For the thing of they can't develop their body like we would develop as an adult in terms of their cardiovascular system. So their progression of how they actually get fitter, quote unquote, isn't the same. And if you ever watch a kid run for a long distance, they run, then just stop, have a minute, and then can run again, and then they stop. And that's purely for their energy systems. Additionally, if you went, right, let's do pre-season for an under-10s team, you've got how many players? 12 players, 14 players, whatever it might be, all at different stages, physical stages in their life. So they're all going to develop. You might get one out of that actually is starting to improve and develop their fitness ability, but the rest of them will have, they'll get zero bit or very little benefit out of it, apart from they burn some more calories and they have a little less energy at the end of the session. But in terms of how we would see it, they get very little improvement out of it at all.
What about the weights then? The strength training, getting on weights and stuff like that?
So strength training can be done at the earliest of ages. Anytime it's all about movements, so you train movements rather than you train kind of different training methods. So if they can squat and lunge and twist and bound and stuff like that, you should really, if you've got a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old, they can probably do all of that at the moment. So all you're doing is you're training movements, and that's it, improving their strength. You don't need to get in the gym and start doing bicep curls and heavy deadlifts and things like that. That said, strength training and resistance training and any type of kind of intensity training like that will only help players. There was a whole thing, there used to be a myth that said like weight training used to stunt growth and things like that. And that's like complete rubbish. There's no evidence to suggest that. But you need to get the fundamentals in first. So I'd say if someone can squat really well, then yeah, you can start adding a little bit of resistance, but you have to be mindful. And again, this comes down to expertise of how they're squatting, what age are they squatting at, why are they squatting, what program are they doing that allows them to do it. And it's kind of such a detailed subject that it's not really down to, right, you're 16 now, you can get in the gym, because a 16-year-old might not have to be able to move properly, or might not have the flexibility or the mobility to actually get anything out of strength training. But then you might have a super like athletic 13, 14-year-old that go, actually, he's squatting really well, we can get him in the gym and start adding, only progressively, start adding a little bit of resistance where he's going to get a lot from it. So it's such a varied thing, but you've got to take strength training out of the conversation where it's not to do with being in the gym and it's not to do with weight training. Strength training is how can we just make our muscles stronger and how can we make them better at moving properly. So that's kind of where there's disparity in the conversation, but that can be done at the earliest age groups. It's just how you do that and what you do. Like if you ever tell a kid to not climb a tree because they might overtrain or overdevelop themselves, well, that's never going to happen because a kid can climb a tree, but that's strength training. You ever do climbing? Yeah. Climbing's hard. Yeah. But kids will do that anyway, so they're already doing strength training. But it's kind of a disparity in the conversation to go, they mustn't do this at this age, because it all depends on the individual really as well.
I think what's good as well is we've just been downstairs and you've filmed a load of exercises for how they develop their strength training without using weights, just using their body weight. So we'll put some of them up on the Coaches Club as well for people to have a look at. Okay, moving on to the next bit, and I'll try and put this into a bit of context to make it a different one to answer. So let's say that you've got 3 kids in grassroots football programs. One of them is 7, one's 11, and one of them is 18. And you're appointed by that club to run the strength and conditioning for all the age groups. So you're coaching those 3 kids, 7-year-old, 11-year-old, 18-year-old. What would you be doing at each of those age groups in the sessions?
I think with all 3 age groups, it's creating, the big part of it is creating good habits as well. So it's creating a thing or an ethos to go, this is only going to benefit you. So you get buy-in from the players, parents, whoever. So especially with like the under 7, it's just about having as much fun as possible, but doing combination of different movements like dodgeball or wrestling or bundling or, you know, what was the game that we used to play? We have to run after like bulldog or something like that. All games like that are so much fun for kids, but they give you so many different physical benefits as well. So you just look at, let's say dodgeball, for instance. If you look at the actual physical requirements of throwing a ball at someone else and then dodging the ball from someone else, and you've broken it down, there's like agility, balance, coordination, strength, core stability in there. There's power, there's reaction time. So you're starting to go, actually, this is going to benefit my kids loads for that under 7 as much as possible. And big thing with kids is you're making it as fun as possible. So you're combining the two, and then that way they go, actually, doing loads of physical stuff or what they would call fitness stuff is actually quite fun because you're making it hilarious for them, but they're getting loads of stuff out of them. Like if you were to get 2 under 7s wrestling with each other on the floor, bearing in mind we're being practical with it, or they're fighting over a ball and yet they're both holding a ball and they're wrestling to try and snatch it off someone else. They're doing so much stuff physically, but yet they're having loads of fun because they just think they're wrestling with their mate. But yeah, me trying to take a ball off of you, and I think we've got a video of it, me trying to take a ball off you requires so much strength and power and grounding and stability that actually they're getting loads of work done, but they're enjoying it at the same time. And it's games like that. And I wouldn't really focus on something specific. I'll just focus on moving and all about how they move and what activities they move and exposing them to different movements as much as possible. So being able to crawl, jump, bounce, roll over, all of those stuff, they're really important. So it's a combination of different things. With the, was it 12-year-old?
11, 12, yeah.
11, 12-year-old, so they're just starting secondary school. Probably starting to be on the stages of puberty, so you really need to be careful of that in terms of how much additional work and physical work you're doing, because some will be able to take it and their body will really develop from it. Others it would be a slow burner. So you start looking at a bit more of the fundamentals of strength. Now strength, as I've said in those videos, is the foundation of everything. So you start looking at, can they move properly? Can they move efficiently? Can they do basic movements of squatting, lunging, rolling, bounding, jumping, all of those? And you just start bringing that into something a bit more specific. Still with the ball, still your team, still doing like your football practice, but you just start incorporating those movements. But it's technique. It's always about technique. How well do they move? Rather than going, right, we need to make this harder. It's not about making it harder, it's just about making them move better, but just having a little bit more focus on it. And then for your 18-year-old, you kind of need more dedicated sessions to get something out of them. So it can't be to do 5 minutes before football or 5 minutes in the warm-up we do on strength and conditioning, which you probably need a bit more, like 20 minutes, half hour of work with them for them to see any benefits. But then you can really push them. It doesn't have to be on the grass, it can be in a hall, in a gym, whatever, and you can start focusing on specific things to say if they want to get fast, or say if they want to get they want to go for longer, or they want to get stronger, or they want to develop their upper body strength or something. You can start tailoring because their body's primed to deal with kind of more physical load a little bit. But that's where you'd kind of specify a little bit more, but you'd have to spend a lot more dedicated time specifically, not with let's incorporate a ball here and try and make it fun. It's a little bit more serious because they're 18 and they need to be more serious with it because the drawbacks of it are a little bit more intense. Especially if they're 18, they're probably playing with men and things like that. So the intensity is probably a lot harder. So they need to step up with how much physical load they're exposed to and what their capacity of training is as well starts to go up. So again, creating good habits, but a bit more dedicated time specifically on strength and conditioning with an 18-year-old, more as with the 7 and the 12-year-old, but you can be a lot more specific with an 18-year-old.
Brilliant. So another topic that comes up quite often that people ask questions about, and you've answered this before on a course which I found quite enlightening, gave me a lot more information. You obviously worked in the Girls' Centre of Excellence as well. What is the differences in terms of the physical corner, in terms of how you would differentiate your training for male and female players?
So with the girls, there's a lot higher probability of them injuring ACLs, having bigger injuries than there is the boys. So you're more looking at times at injury prevention rather than developing physical capacity or physical capabilities. It's more actually, can I keep them playing? Then there's a stat somewhere, it's something like 60%, or there's a stat somewhere that says, I know 60% is in there, that are likely to have some sort of ACL and or hamstring injury. And that's purely down to hip angle, how they're built.
Yeah.
With hip angles, you get a Q angle, and with women it's wider because they have wider hips, so there's more probability of them doing ACL and hamstring injuries, which is why there's such a big focus with females to develop hamstrings and glutes. Moreover, from the gym thing, but it's you develop them for injury prevention, whereas guys don't really have that that risk because their body structure's just not developed like that, which is fine, but that comes with a separate problem because typically with guys it's more quad dominant and hip flexor issues that they tend to have because there's a lot more power going through it, and that kind of changes. But with the females, for me it was always about how long can I keep them injury free. Then obviously you still try to develop them as much as possible, like we still want to improve their speed and whatever they might be working on, but I always found from experience that with fellas you could push them a lot harder, but with females it was more about the volume of the work rather than the intensity of work, whereas fellas it was we can work really hard but we probably can't work that much at it.
Yeah.
Whereas it was a little bit often would work the best with the girls. So you'd only spend maybe 10-15 minutes of a session, but it'll be every session that you'd spend on it. Whereas it might be with the boys, it might be half hour once a week would be enough for them to really develop and see some kind of changes with. But that was the biggest thing with me with the female game, is just understanding what their risks are, and also you've got to think with the female game as well. At some point they're going to go through their cycle, and they're at a bigger risk of injury then when they're going through their cycle because joints are lax, joint mobility starts to increase, so they're actually at a higher risk even more of injury during that kind of 4 or 5 day cycle. But then after that is a window where you can really get a load out of them. So there's only so much you can do at Centre of Excellence. I know in the national game they kind of have that all in a requirement when they do their questionnaire or their checklist before they go on camp in the national game, and they find out, and it's where people are at and what they're exposed to, and can we get a sweet spot in their training cycle where they can actually just start stepping it up a little bit more. There's loads of research out there to give you answers on that, but that was a big thing with the female game anyway.
What age is that? From kind of 7 upwards, or is there an age where you start to look at that like tipping point where you're going to focus more on?
Puberty is always a tipping point.
Yeah.
Before that, boys and girls are realistically going to be the same.
Yeah.
There's no, obviously there's a hormone difference there, but realistically, boys and girls up until secondary school, unless you might get the 1 or 2 odd one that's an early developer, but predominantly all relatively the same. You train them very similarly, there's not much difference, but it's when they go secondary school, puberty starts playing a bigger impact. That's when you need to change the difference between the two.
So your foundation phase, you're still sticking to developing ABCs, etc. As they get into those puberty in those teenage years, you might slightly start tailoring it, obviously depending on the knowledge you've got, the skill set you've got, the experience you've got as well.
Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. So we might have touched on this already, really, but what are some common misconceptions you would say about strength and conditioning in youth football or grassroots football? I mean, what are those things that people say to you that you go, oh, right, okay, and you just think, oh, I need to just discuss this or educate it based on your knowledge or your opinions?
Stretching is always one.
Right.
That's the best stretches. How can I make my players last or be fitter than the other team is another one. That's always one that comes up. After doing maybe 1 or 2 sessions, they should see some instant results. And I was like, the body doesn't work like that. Like, it needs to be a consistent thing. But with stretching, like, realistically, until they, again, puberty is a big thing. Until they hit puberty, don't need to be stretching at all. Like, it's again, if you're doing all those activities in terms of moving in multiple different planes of motion and moving in multiple different ways, they're kind of pliable enough. And let's be honest, with stretching, you're trying to increase flexibility. And if you ever stretch the muscle, like if you ever get a chicken and try and stretch it, by the way, it's impossible, right? And this is exactly how muscle works. It's all about pliability. So it's all about exposing the body to stretching and contraction, stretching and contraction. That's how you get like more flexible or a range around a joint. So if you've ever known a 10-year-old to go, oh, I've overstretched there, or I've done something, like, it doesn't happen. Or you don't ever see a 10-year-old when they go out to the playground go, I need to warm up before I sprint 50 yards across the playground after ball, and then nothing happens. Like, no one, never meet an 8-year-old that pulls their hamstring for sprinting after sitting in a classroom for 2 hours. Like, it doesn't happen. But you put a 20-year-old in a classroom doing that and go, right, go and sprint. They're definitely doing it. So you don't need to do that. But puberty plays such a big point or turning point in physically is because hormones change massively. Testosterone, estrogen, all comes into play. But also their body's growing at a rapid rate. So that's when you need to start being really specific and understanding their body's needs at that age to go, right, stretching is a good part and it can be a detriment. Like, if you're making a massive 14-year-old, and we've seen them, a 14-year-old that looks like he drove to the game.
Yeah.
And you're going, right, now stretch, and he can barely touch his toes, and you're having a go at him because he's got no flexibility. Well, that's because, like, his bones are growing quicker than his muscles are growing, so no wonder he can't stretch properly. So if anything, you're making him do something that his muscles definitely don't want to do. So again, it's a detriment to the player, but yet you're still making him do it because this is what we should be doing and things like that. So that's stretching's one. Fitness is another one, but fitness where we need to go longer than the other team. And right, we're not doing that, so we can do a full-on pre-season, because this is what I did when I was a player at senior level, whatever like that. Again, all depends on the age group, all depends on why you're doing it, and realistically, at any age group in youth football and grassroots football, going for longer isn't going to be the be-all and end-all of your players and whether they're going to be successful, or not. Like, there's going to be a whole different contributions to whether you're successful or not, or whatever the reasons you are doing that and coaching that team. But fitness doesn't come from running around the pitch 2 or 3 times, or doing fitness, or doing the bleep test. Like, the bleep test has got to be the worst test ever invented. Like, that is rubbish. Like, all it does is a test, but people do it as training. And it's like, this is just a test to measure your ability now. Unless you're going to do it halfway in the season, or at the end of the season, or a quarter of the way into your meso cycle, or whatever it is, there's no point in doing it. Like, so you see, like, 14-year-olds doing the bleep test, like, unless you're doing this mid-season, which you won't do because you haven't got the time with the players, why are you doing it?
What about the yo-yo? Because my experience is where I was coaching, didn't do the bleep test with younger ones or older ones, to be fair, but it moved to a yo-yo test instead. Yeah,
the yo-yo test is a little bit more applicable, but again, it's a test, so there's no point testing something unless you're going to test it again. And that's the big part, like, and how often you're going to test it again, and why you're testing it again. Because if you're doing a test, let's say pre-season, a month before you're playing games, right, great, you've recognised everyone. Like, the actual test isn't a problem, it's just the reasons why you're doing it. So, like, you do it like August, they start their league in September, let's say. Unless you're doing it in November or December because you've done a endurance style program, then of course everyone's going to improve or should improve because they've just had 3 or 4 months of playing football and games and things like that. It's not because you've done anything different. But then what's the reason of doing the yo-yo test at Christmas? Like, is there a reason for it? So it's all about the rationale why. Yeah.
I've got one for you,
Go on.
and this is always a hot topic, and it's one that I quite like to discuss and talk about and bring up with people. SAQ work with at grassroots level.
Rubbish.
Yeah. So I'll give you my issue, and then you might even shoot me down, to be fair. I see loads of coaches doing work with ladders, hurdles and stuff like that. I've done some SAQ qualifications, some fundamental movement qualifications. And when I done that years and years ago, the people taking the course were kind of saying, if you do this wrong and you ingrain incorrect techniques into kids, you're actually more likely to make them get an injury rather than actually improve those chances. And when I done that course, it was like, this is about, the big focus was on injury prevention. A lot of coaches will come and go, right, we're doing ladders and hurdles because we want to make the players quicker. But they're not actually talking about technique, running technique, how you should be running, how you should be going through the hurdles. They don't understand technique. So my thoughts on it are, I understand why coaches do it, especially at grassroots level. They think, right, we'll get some ladders to help, but they're probably not educated enough on, you need to be able to do this properly, and in making small corrections to like a leg position or foot position or the way a player's arms are moving. So it can then probably, it won't be benefiting players, it could be detrimental. My perspective on it is, if you're using it for a bit of fun, we're going to have some running, jumping games and stuff like that, and just doing like little running games, jumping around, jumping over hurdles, especially with young kids, that's fine. But if you're doing the more specific movements through them, if you don't know how to teach them in detail, you probably should stay away from it. But you all know a lot more. That's my thoughts on it. You'll know a lot more than me.
Spot on. Completely agree with you. They are fine if you're having fun with the kids or as part of a general warm-up. But realistically, like the ladders, whoever thought of ladders, like, A is a genius to sell the idea that it's speed, agility and quickness. But also ladders, when have you ever seen someone sprint as fast as they can and take little steps in a ladder, or do anything that's remotely to do with agility in a ladder or a hurdle? Like, the hurdles are tiny. Like, I don't know at what point anyone would benefit or gain anything out of jumping over a 6-inch hurdle. Like, you just run. Do you know what I mean? Like, you can run over hurdles quite easily. So, in my opinion, blunt as I am, completely pointless. But if you want to work on SAQ, there's ways to do it without having to use apparatus, equipment, whatever it is. But again, it's such a detailed subject that you've got to think agility. You can do anything, because agility is like a rapid movement in response to a stimulus. So me just whistling or saying a command and them doing it because they don't know something's coming, and then suddenly doing an action from that command is agility. So there's a combination of different activities you can do to improve agility. Or if I was to throw a ball at someone and they would manage to catch it, that's essentially, even though it's reaction time, it's essentially agility, because it's a full rapid movement in response to a ball flying at their head. So in principle, you can do speed, agility, quickness in a combination of different ways, but it definitely doesn't need ladders, hurdles, hoops, whatever it is, in order to do it. And if you are doing it to improve speed and agility, quickness, probably wasting your time, because it's not really going to do anything.
Okay, moving on to the next question then. Because obviously your specialism is strength and conditioning, but you're an A licensed outfield coach as well. How, in your opinion, how would you balance it in a session of trying to get your different outcomes, so your strength and conditioning, your technical work, your tactical work, but also how would you do that like through the phases, foundation phase up to YDP, PDP? I
think for me, because it is an interest of mine and I see the value in it, it would be a big part of it. In terms of percentage split, I wouldn't be able to tell you, because it would all depend on the priority, but especially if it was, say, senior level or, pro development phase, whatever, it'd be a big part of it. But ultimately, at that stage, you've got to look at what's the priority, and the priority is we've got to win games. So if it's still gonna be a big part, but probably won't be the biggest part, because tactically you need to set up your team, and technically you need to make sure they're good enough. Even though you're not going to make a player better once they're an adult, in terms of technically they're going to get refined and they're going to become a little bit more knowledgeable around the game, but you've probably done all your technical ability work with them by the time they get up to early 20s onwards. But their tactical understanding, that's kind of where you're starting to make your progress. The younger they are, the earlier you are and the younger they are, when you start this type of, training or these type of activities, it's only going to benefit them. Like, unless you do it absolutely ridiculously and you overload them and it's it's over the top and too much, they're only going to benefit out of being physically better with whatever they do. Even if they don't become a footballer or they don't pursue a career in football, the physical capabilities and characteristics that they develop at an early age, if you were to do this at an early age, is going to transfer to other sports, a healthier, more lively lifestyle. So incorporating this in the foundation phase and playing a big part of it, even though it can be still involved in football, and you can still kind of blend in and mix in a football and it look like football, but it's not really football. That's where my bigger probability of the S&C stuff will come in, because I think that's a bit more where you're going to make most of the difference. And then as you go through to the YDP stage, it's what's a bit more of a priority. You can kind of maybe refine a little bit, but you're just teaching them the basic understandings of, right, this is how we move properly, and by moving properly, this is going to benefit you by A, you're going to spend more time playing rather than being injured. B, you're going to get better athletically. Now, if you had a range of different players, all of the same ability, but one can run faster, you're just going to pick the one that can run faster, because that's going to benefit your team. So if I can make you run faster, jump higher, go for longer, and be stronger, you're going to go, actually, that's only going to benefit my team. So you can spend a bit more time, but you just be a bit more specific on what your players want to start to focus on and train with.
So you mentioned in there about overtraining. I don't think I've seen much of it, to be fair, in grassroots football, of players overtraining, especially at the younger age groups, because they seem to have just endless energy. But what are the signs that a young player may be overtraining, especially as they probably get, I'd imagine, teenage years? What are the signs? How would you recognise that someone's overtraining?
Ill all the time, injured, can't sleep properly. They're the big three. Suddenly there's a big change in their weight, whether it's gaining weight or losing weight. And just generally lethargic. But it's super difficult to be overtrained. They might be overloaded, but if you ever see someone that's overtrained and overtraining is apparent in them, they're like, you can't even get them out of bed. But with kids, because it's like they seem to have an unlimited energy reserve and things like that, where you've got to look for the details or the cracks in the details. So they're maybe not hitting their full potential in training or in a game physically. It might be that they seem to be off ill from school quite a bit, or they seem to be getting like regular colds or coughs and things like that. Real low level illnesses, but it seems to be all the time. Sleep, if they're not sleeping well, or if their behaviour changes, especially around puberty, if suddenly they get mood swings. Now, that can be down to puberty itself.
I was going to say, like, we've coached teenagers.
Yeah. Well, exactly. But it can also be to fact they're so fatigued that they can't deal with the psychological emotions and everything that's coming in, because you demand more from them, because you go, well, why are you not doing that this week? You were doing it a month ago, you were doing all this, and now they're like, I'm trying, but I just can't at the moment, because I'm doing 5 days a week training and games on the weekend. You just got to look for the cracks and details. Changes in behaviours is a big one, or changes in just their general well-being is another big one. But sometimes it can be just that they're absolutely knackered from school.
Yeah, and I think I know, and I saw something about this the other day, because I was looking at stuff. I saw something come up about kids and stuff like that. If I ever asked my kids after school, what happened today? What did you do today? Their response is normally, oh, I don't remember. And they're like, I don't remember. I'm like, you've just left. They're like, I don't. And I remember reading something the other day, and it was like, they just need some time to decompress. And it was like, imagine what it's like when you've been at work all day, or you've been at coaching all day, and as soon as you get in the door, you've got people on your case. They're like, oh, what was this? How was this today? What's it? You just want to decompress for like 10 minutes. Just let me sit down. But they're the same as well. Like kids are exactly the same. And that if they are, like say, school's hard enough as it is, then they're training. If they're training multiple times a week as well, probably just giving them that time to just go, give me a minute here.
It's such a big part, and you're spot on. My 5-year-old daughter is in first year of reception at the moment. If I try and ask her about a day, even though I'm so eager to find out a day, she's like, don't know. I can't remember. And it's like, I get it. So it would work all the time. Sometimes players, in fact, you realise that the rest is just as important as the work. And sometimes players just need more rest than others as well.
That was actually the next one on my list was about the importance of rest and recovery. But again, as we've done through the conversation about different age groups, because like you said there, 7, 8-year-olds, they can sprint and then all of a sudden they're exhausted, and then 20 seconds later they can sprint again. Whereas older players, their rest and recovery, their immediate rest and recovery looks different. But just rest and recovery in general at different age groups, what do you think players need?
Foundation phase, asking a kid to rest is just non-existent. Like you're asking your boys or your girls to go, right, you need to have 2 weeks off for the season. Just isn't going to be happening. But theirs is more cross training. Go and do a different sport. So you get your football September to April. Go and take up a summer sport. Go and do athletics or cricket or hockey or whatever it is. Just do something different for a few weeks, month, whatever it might be. Still play football, still go down the park, do all of that. But the load on the body is different. So the load that they're able to deal with is different. So you just expose them to, again, different movements and activities so they don't overtrain, because that's a big part of it. But so they just get rest in that certain demand or discipline. As they get older, it becomes more needed where they just need to actually rest completely. So as you start to go up through puberty into the latter stage of their teenage years, that's when you're kind of going, actually, you just need 2 weeks off. You just need 3 weeks. Just don't do anything. I used to say to the senior lads, when I was working with them, as soon as the season comes and you're not playing, 3 weeks off minimum. Don't do anything. Don't even go running. Go in the gym, fine. If you want to tick over, do bits and pieces, not a problem. But don't do anything. Just have 3 weeks off, which 95% of players went, result. H has said, don't do anything. That's exactly what I'm doing. And they're going to come back, and then you might get like the eager ones that go, I just need a program. It's fine, you set them a program. But especially like as they're kind of fully developed into their man or woman's body, it's just a point of you just need to relax, let your body rest. You've just had a 10-month season of games and all training sessions and loads, and the psychological demand on it as well, where just go and have a break. You'll put on weight. You will feel sluggish and less fit and everything like that as soon as you start. That's the whole part of early pre-season, is that's where we get you back to fighting fit, and that's the whole idea of pre-season. But your body's had a full relaxed recovery and it's able to deal with whatever you throw at it for the next season. But there's a huge demand. I think it's every week you don't spend relaxing, you start to increase. I've got the stat wrong somewhere, but for every week that you don't spend relaxing or having complete rest, increases your percentage chance of injury by like 10 to 15%. So if you only have 1 week off, suddenly you've started to increase your risk of injury during the season by 10 to 15% every week that you don't have off.
So following on from that, I've got 2 questions, grassroots football related, in terms of people trying to develop players. Will players playing multiple sports in the foundation phase make them a better footballer than if they only play football the whole way through those years?
Yeah, definitely. 100%. There's loads of research to suggest that as well.
Go on then.
So if you were teaching your player, and you just got to imagine your player is like the Matrix, someone in the Matrix, and you go, right, if I can plug into you, and just talking physical capabilities, all the physical capabilities that happen in football, you're going to become absolutely efficient in moving exactly how a footballer moves. If I then start throwing all the physical capabilities that a tennis player, and suddenly you become really good physically at being a tennis player, and then a hockey player, then a basketball player, suddenly you've got all these movements that your body's been exposed to. So if and when you start to train your body at a high capacity in the YDP, in the later development stages, into the pro development phase, and we're starting to really push your training capacity, you can deal with more because you've got the foundation of dealing with more, because you've been exposed to loads of different types of movements. You're just talking physically there as well, not necessarily a transfer over of movement skills and mobility skills and technical skills that you get from other sports, but just physically, the load and the different types of loads it places on the body allows your body to deal with loads and loads and loads of different training demands on it. So that it's more, not necessarily then, it's more later on, because the body goes, yeah, I know how to deal with this because I've been trained that down there, and I know the type of movement, I know the type of capacity that I can work at, I know what type of activity I need to do in order to deal with this. So,
okay, I've got a follow up to that, which is just playing football related. Foundation phase again. Will a player that plays, we all said it, my son or my daughter's a striker. Okay. Will a player that plays one position the whole way through their youth football career be better, in your opinion, than a player who plays a variety of different positions through their football career, obviously related more towards the physical corner?
If it's purely related on the physical corner, there probably is certain aspects that you'd only get as being a striker that you don't have to deal with, i.e. running backwards. Just take, for instance, there's very limited running backwards as a striker that you have to do. Maybe if a ball's going over your head from a goal kick from your own goalkeeper. But realistically, you're not doing any type of running backwards. Do that as a centre-back, and you're having to run back fast sometimes, or pretty quickly, or in order to be in line with a player or add depth to a back line, whatever. So there's definitely different types of movements you do with different positions. So I'd say, in order to expose, and it's all about exposing the body to different types of activities, because that's how the body is able to adapt to different types of activities, and the more they are able to adapt to, the more they can grow from them, is get them to play in the different positions, because typically strikers play with their back to goal. So it's all about maybe turning, maybe short, sharp type movements, whereas if you're a fullback, everything's forward really. You're doing very little running backwards, but everything's long distance forward, or I'm turning around and I'm running back to my own goal, but I'm still running forward. Whereas in a centre midfielder, there's loads of different directions you're turning. So in terms of physically, get them to play a combination in different positions, because they'll be exposed to different types of movements.
Good, brilliant. Yeah, and I think we talked before about if you're only making the same movement over time, is there a chance that can cause like overuse injuries once they get to adults if they're making the same movement? Or?
Not really. They become really proficient at that movement. But what happens when they have to do a movement that
they can't do?
Yeah. That's when the injury happens normally.
Right. Yeah. Gotcha. Okay. Going on to the last bit then. Something I know you're quite passionate about. We've talked about this recently. You've helped me out with it a little bit. Is the importance of nutrition for young players as they get older, and then what kind of recommendations do you have for it? Because we're not in grassroots football. You're not expecting people to be having all their meals prepped for them in preparation for the game or anything like that, but just practical advice for grassroots footballers on the nutrition side of things.
In terms of kids, right? So all kids like their food and they like the sweets and the sugary things and things like that. Absolutely fine. Moderation is everything. I know that sounds really general, but it really is. Anything too much of something is going to be too much and a detriment. So if I was to say, right, go and have 10 kilos of broccoli, I mean, you're going to really struggle with having 10, like you're going to have some detriments to you. Do you know what I mean? But broccoli is a superfood. Like, it's absolutely brilliant for you. I need it for nearly everything you can do, or the body's chemical reaction in the body comes from broccoli. It's amazing, that food. But if I gave you too much of it, there'd be a detriment. So with kids, and my missus is brilliant at it, it's the earlier you start at teaching them good nutritional outlook on what's good things, what's necessarily not the best for you, but it's nice to have. That's the best thing, because what you've got to look at with kids is, as you get older, if they're always deprived of something, when they get to make their own decisions, they're then going to have something. So if I was to say to my girls or your boys, you definitely can't have that, definitely can't have chocolate, or you definitely can't have crisps, things like that. As soon as they get to secondary school and they're making their own way to school, suddenly they're allowed to have it because we don't know about it, and it's going to have a bigger detriment to them. But it's a case of just teaching them good quality nutritional advice, which is really basic, like fruits and vegetables, drinking water or drinking fluid is like the most important thing. Like trying to have a rounded variety, loads of different colours on your plate. That's literally the simple things you can do. And it's just teaching them, going, this is only going to benefit you.
So what about flip it then? Because I think that with kids and adults, kids especially, are so affected by marketing. So if you take a kid to football, you've just said there, drink water. Most kids, when they go to football, go, I need my Lucozade, my Gatorade, whatever. Especially foundation phase players. What's your opinion on that?
It's rubbish, isn't it? Like, all you're doing is feeding them an overly sugary drink that they can't deal with the sugar. Like, I think in a bottle of Lucozade, 500ml bottle, there's something like 60 grams of sugar in it, which is like insane for a 10-year-old to be able to deal with. Like, they just have a hyperglycemic attack, basically. Absolutely mental. And it's no surprise that if those type of kids that do have them, that those type of kids suddenly go, like, can't deal with focus or can't concentrate because their body just wants to go insane in terms of dealing with all the sugar that they've got in their body or they've just consumed. So it's probably caused them a detriment because it's a hypertonic drink, so it has more sugar in than fluid in terms of the ability that the body can actually absorb it. So you're actually dehydrating them, not hydrating them. So give them some water. Isotonic drinks are a little bit different. But realistically, kids, like, you can have a banana and it will last them 90 minutes. So you don't need a Lucozade to keep them going. And the only reason isotonic drinks are good is because of the electrolytes in them, not because of the energy that it gets to them. It's the electrolytes that they replace. And realistically, if they're having an hour session, they won't need to replenish all the electrolytes. And any electrolytes that they do replenish is going to come from the meal that they have after. So it's pointless, but I get it because it's the marketing thing, and Ronaldo has it and all the pros have it. So, well, it must be really good for my kid, but they're on a completely different nutritional program. So you can't relate that to your son or your daughter that's training a couple of times a week and playing a match on the weekend for 45 minutes.
Right, brilliant. That's all my questions. What's your, obviously, you're still tutoring with us at the minute, we're all tutoring together. Any future football plans? Is that ship sailed now, or is it something?
I would always say ship sailed, but there's always people that will try and rope you back into that game. I think for me, it's always that I've ticked that box. Once I've ticked a box, I can move on to the next one. I don't know what, but there's always, literally a couple of weeks ago, I was asked about a job and it's like, yeah, I don't think so. But
what about, you've obviously got young kids. What about if they start showing an interest?
If they want to, great. If they do something completely different, I'd like them to do something completely different.
So you don't have to coach? Is that
so I don't have to coach them, but so I don't know anything about it, because we'd always look at it going, why are they doing that?
Yeah.
What are they doing that for? And I don't want that. I just want to enjoy watching them, and that's it.
Yeah. Yeah, I've got mine starting soon. So
you'll
about to go through that journey again. But no, thanks for joining us. Really appreciate it. Thank you very much.